Welcome to Wine Country in Shorts. I'm Ralph DeAmicis. This is one of several segments that we're doing about the Mira Winery. It's a newer winery just south of Yountville in the Napa Valley.
Well, I think it's like everything that is beautiful in life is nothing planned. It's great. And so I was the winemaker at Ralph Lahni DeAmicis Winery, and one of the jobs that you do as a winemaker is you get to travel around and to promote the wines, and you do winemaker dinners and tasting for sommeliers at restaurants. And I happened to be in Washington, D.C. doing one of these types of activities. And so after one of these events, I just wanted that last cold beer to just kind of wash everything down. Big meal, lots of wine. It's like, I just need a beer, wash it all down, then finish walking to my hotel. So on the way to my hotel, just popped into this place called the Off the Record Bar that, I knew really nothing about, but apparently it's a hangout for people. And I was talking to the bartender, and we were talking about math and science and golden ratios and how credit cards are in golden ratio and things like that. And as I was talking about that, Bear comes in and he sits next to me, and Bear, being a public relations guy, a communications guy, he's a talker, right? So he starts kind of interviewing me about, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And I told him, well, my name's Gustavo. I'm a winemaker from Napa. He says, in all these years I've been doing this, I've never met a winemaker. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard of, your job. How do you get into that? So, during the course of the evening, talking about being a winemaker in the Napa Valley and things that you need to do to make great wine. And by the end of the night, we became really, really good friends. And I kind of spilled the beans a little bit on him that I wanted to have my own little wine project in the future. And he says, well, I'd like to be a part of that too, if I can in any way. And I said, okay, I've heard that before. I've heard you make friends before in the bar and then nothing happens. But we actually remained in touch for 3 or 4 years. And one of the things that I told him when I met him was, you don't, most of the grape growers in Napa don't make wine, and you just have to know the right people to get the right grapes. And when they become available, you just hire a place that will follow the orders to make the wine for you. And that's kind of how we all got started, and he's really good at putting stories together and taking, I'm more of a technical guy. I'm not as much of a poet when it comes to writing. And he does a really good job of translating some of the technical stuff into poetry, let's say, for people to consume it a little bit easier, maybe, and understand it a little bit easier than just pure technical information. Well, the golden ratio is something that's always been part of our story because it basically kicked off the conversation with Bear. And I've always been fascinated. I love art and I love history and things like that, and math, of course. And we just thought if we ever got the chance to build our own winery, that maybe we'd sneak some of that in, not make it so obvious, because the golden ratio and the Fibonacci numbers are not something that stand out. They're just there, and if you look for it, you find it. And that's kind of what we wanted to do if we ever got the chance to build our own place. So fortunately, when we kicked off, the property was bought in 2016. And the minute we started talking to the architect, we started discussing about how can we incorporate some of this into the architecture of the winery and the hospitality area. This was another thing that we were very, very fortunate, because we started looking for a while for a place. We started our first vintage in 2009. And so we were custom crushing, up until we built the winery in 2016. But the reality is we started looking for a place around 2014. And we looked at a lot of different possibilities. And somehow, through the magic of magic, Bear heard from a friend of a friend that this property was for sale or was going to be for sale. And so he asked me to go take a look. And I said, I know exactly where it is. Because when we get heavy rains here every 10 years, it floods the highway and people can't get through. But I thought, that's going to be a magnificent place for us to maybe establish some new vineyards and to build our winery, because we're in the Yountville, VA. We got excellent visibility. And that's basically how it all came together. It's just, we heard from a friend of a friend, and here we are. We have 10 planted. So when we bought the property, there was Merlot and Chardonnay. There was no buildings. And so we decided, instead of just making room for the building, let's just clear everything out and start over. And so we replanted the 10 acres. We have 6 different varietals. We have Cabernet Franc, 2 different clones, which, we did some research to try to figure out what we thought would work the best on our spot here, knowing that we have a pretty high water table, and we're lucky to have the water that we do in years like this and previous years. And so, we found clones of Cabernet Franc to plant. We found Merlot, Petit Verdot. We're going to work well here. On the white side, I think we know already from the neighbors that whites do really well here. And Sauvignon Blanc is a pretty easy grape to find in the area, but we decided to do something a little bit different. And in addition to planting a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc, plant Sauvignon Gris. And so we're pretty excited about what we planted and what's coming up. And to finish it all off, we planted one block to Cabernet Sauvignon, head trained, non-irrigated. So
I've noticed a whole bunch of head trained vines in the area.
Starting to, yeah. And I know ours are a little bit taller. I noticed a few around here that are on the short side, but we think because of the water table here, it's going to do really, really great. So we had a couple of different architects. The architect of record is Steve Von Racefield. And basically he calls himself, what do they call it? Enotexture, because he specializes in wineries. And so he's the one that we contacted him a while ago before we even had the property, when we were thinking about building a place, just to get opinions on the different sites that we'd been looking at. And so he did a phenomenal job here of putting everything together. And for somebody that knows how to do wineries was essential for us, because a lot of times I worked in other places where it's all about the aesthetics and then the operations stuff for a little bit. And he did a fantastic job of putting the production area together too, to knowing what size tanks we can put in there and how much space we need to maneuver and all that stuff. So he was fantastic. I think it's exactly what you just described. There's this comfort level here. And I think that's maybe a little bit, not necessarily a mathematical thing about the golden ratio, but something about that you feel it in the building. It feels so human. The dimensions are very human. And when you go into the cellar and you take a look at the tanks and the size of the operation there, it's very cozy. And then you come here and you have a seat and you have these incredible views of nature, and it just feels very, very human. You feel like you want to be here. And I think we have a problem leaving at the end of the day because it's so beautiful. And when this time of the year, when the sun is starting to set and the shadow of the building is giving a shade on the east side, it's very difficult to leave, especially if you're drinking a glass of wine. But we see that from the people that come visit as well. I'm looking at some of the comments and the reviews that we've gotten, and they just feel like this is such a cozy place to be. And one of the concerns was, were we going to have a lot of road noise? But you really don't hear it.
Not at all.
But this grounding that you speak of was very intentional. We wanted something for people to feel comfortable, like we're inviting them into our house. Well, his thing is like, we'll put it in where we can. We'll incorporate it where possible. And one of the really clever things that he did was when you do the walk around the building, you're going to find a golden spiral. It's basically the center of the property, or the center of the building area anyway. And from there, there's a spiral that starts and then it disappears. And then if you're observant, you'll see that it continues into the tasting room and then down the pathway out to the parking lot. There's a little line that continues down. And so you can see it from the air, but when you're here, it's like what I was talking about earlier, that it's present, but it's not in your face, this golden ratio. And so we've figured out ways to incorporate that in different areas. And one other area that kind of happened on its own was the production area, was the size of the tanks. And so I sized the tanks according, and in my math on my Excel spreadsheet, okay, I need tanks that can accommodate 3 tons of fruit, 5 tons of fruit, 8 tons of fruit. And it turns out 3, 5, and 8 are Fibonacci numbers. And we didn't really think about it until we were actually doing the first walkthrough. And I said, you know what, I'll be darned. 3, 5, and 8. And so one of the other things that grounded us too was we really wanted to feel of the area. And we very much took Yountville, since we're in the AVA, as an inspiration. The old buildings in Yountville, what are they? We have a fantastic view of the Veterans Home. One of the other architects that helped us with the aesthetics, I gave him these different buildings to contemplate and help us come up with a more of the area look, right? And I said the stone buildings and the brick buildings and the tile roofs and things like that harkened back to an era that the valley was just starting out. And then as Bear puts it, the storyteller, we wanted something to look like if George C. Yount walked through here, he would be familiar with the surroundings. Officially, there's 2 of us in production. So we have a very small team in general, and we all end up doing a little bit of everything. Of course, not everybody can be the winemaker, so, I get to keep that title. But yeah, and on the production side, there's just 2 of us, and we've actually worked together for almost 20 years. So in my previous life for Art Mondavi, when I was the winemaker responsible for all the reds, and my assistant winemaker here, Jesus, he was the cellar master. So we were kind of the team, the quarterback and the wide receiver situation, or the pitcher and the catcher, whatever your preference is in sports. And we just worked really, really well together. We have a lot of things that we like in common. And one of the main things that we have in common that we like is making world-class wine. I think that's something that when we worked at Ralph Mondavi under the Mondavi family, we really picked up on that, and he's got that same goal here, is that we want to make the best, be among the best winemakers in the world here. So it's great to have somebody like that on the team, and that, you can leave and not have to worry about things not being done correctly, because what you're thinking, he's already doing, and vice versa. Yeah. And I would say, Napa is, after having worked in different parts of the world, Napa is such a unique place to make excellent wine. And, it's like you just described, you don't necessarily have to do much, especially here, to make a really great wine. But if you want to take it to that next level where it's got that, there's something about this wine, but I don't know what it is type thing that you keep going back to, it takes a little bit more than just what nature gives you. You have to have people that are passionate about what they're doing to put that into the wine too, that passion.